Right, welcome everybody. My name's Robin Harrison. I'm content director at Clarion Gaming, and I'm here today with Steve Myers and Robert Montgomery of FiNTEL Sustain. Now, FiNTEL Sustain takes a different look at ESG and sustainability for the gambling industry. You know, there are some issues with really kind of the variables that affect this sector in particular. And and I suppose really essentially what the guys have done is found a way to create something that's very distinct from the industry. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to run through, I suppose, kind of the rationale of putting this together. And this obviously comes ahead of us announcing the top 10 highest ranked companies using FiNTEL Sustain's criteria. So first of all, Steve, Robert, great to have you here. Great to speak to you both.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us, Robin.
So to start off, what I'd like to do is set out FiNTEL Sustain's position for the audience. You know, we're seeing more and more operators publishing annual ESG reports. And in the EU, we've also seen the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive effectively enforcing this. Yet, for the industry, it's not quite as easy as that, is it? And I was wondering, to start off, would you be able to talk through why sustainability reporting isn't currently fit for purpose in the gambling industry?
Well, I think, as you rightly say about CSRD in Europe, I think is generally ahead in terms of the reporting piece. But CSRD, I think, is essentially, it's still a continuation of self-reporting, despite the fact that, it will help companies get better at that. But there's certainly a lack of independence in the content. Our position at FiNTEL Sustain is that, consistency and transparency, that varies greatly between, the different companies, and something needs to be done to address it in reality. The gaming industry, I have to say, is remarkably inconsistent, in its reporting, despite the fact that many companies, have some really good initiatives and building, really from what is a strong compliance background. However, it seems that this gets lost due to a lack of cooperation in the industry. There's a reluctance to share data, even basic data, and some challenging reputational issues along the way. So that's where we started the journey, on the basis that we generate a consistent approach to rating companies, and having no reliance on traditional information formats. We use technology, and, Robert and I, we have significant knowledge of the industry, and it's hopefully providing something new to the market. We saw it as a huge opportunity to create a sort of fit for purpose model, and that will improve things and at least have a level playing field, because that doesn't exist at the moment. And that level playing field compares peer-to-peer performance. As you say, we've seen many companies developing ESG reporting in great detail. It takes a lot of time, a lot of resource, a lot of cost, a lot of people. Yet despite this, there's a volatile picture out there. So, and also I think companies naturally want to focus on the things they're good at. So, but to establish a true picture, the way we've approached it with FiNTEL Sustain, I think enables this, transparent and consistent picture to appear.
And so I suppose kind of building on that thesis, simply put, how important is sustainability in making gambling an attractive investment opportunity?
Well, from my perspective, it's a really big opportunity. As Steve mentioned, the industry doesn't seem to report with one voice, and so when we looked at this problem, we also looked at it as an opportunity for the industry, but also for investors who are interested to allocate capital to regulated gaming. And in so doing, we think there's a really incredible value to be created by adopting these these measures that we're advocating for, we looked at the ratings and rankings industry generally and how companies were reporting, and we decided that there was a couple of things that we thought needed to happen in order to both allow companies to take advantage of this reporting regime, you mentioned CSRD, and use it to good effect, but also to provide a basis for investors to have trustworthy data that they could use to allocate capital to the sector, debt and equity capital, to support M&A transactions, and to demonstrate the fiscal and financial attributes of sustainability reporting, which are increasingly a necessity, notwithstanding, as Steve alluded to earlier, the politicization of some of it. So we set out to use large language models in AI to put together publicly available data that was able to be trusted by investors because it's based on publicly available data. And that's really key. Steve mentioned self-reporting, and it's an industry that's very much in its infancy, but we wanted to get ahead of the curve because of the weight of all of these measures that are weighing on companies, that are weighing on investors who are building often their own platforms to be able to have data that they can trust in order to make investment decisions. And so we felt that for regulated gaming, which was somewhat behind the curve compared to other industries, that we could come forward with something that was very useful to be used to the advantage of both operating companies as well as capital allocators.
And then to bring this together, FiNTEL Sustain has built out the first ranking system for what you guys are calling Sustainability Plus. So considering the challenges with standardization, talk us through the process of setting up this system.
Well, we have this acronym PESCO, which is basically ESG surrounded by performance and operational elements. And because we don't see, as you can look at ESG in isolation, you need to add in those two bits because there's a consequence of those actions when you carry out those ESG requirements. So following our initial white paper, we built in and built the model, which is over something like 170 data points and takes a 360 view of the industry, taking a deep dive approach to the sector, which we think that's a unique element to it, but gives a more rounded view of a company, a sort of a bellwether of the industry, if you like. We think you get a real feel of how a company acts and approaches significant issues around ESG, particularly the social and the governance side, which, for gaming companies is difficult to navigate. And our model effectively cross-references many of the inputs and uses technology to drive measurement and scores so as to be completely consistent in that respect.
Yeah, and our model cross-references many of these data points. Steve alluded to PESGO. I mean, PESGO is the typical or common ESG measurement criteria plus performance, which is the P, and the O, which is operational. What we've done and what makes us different from perhaps large ratings and rankings agencies are the fact that it's all based on publicly available data and that we take in deep dive data on the regulated gaming industry with respect to financial performance and operation, and and within the typical ESG measures, we gear the aspects that we're measuring towards aspects that are specific to the regulated gaming industry, so that both the companies and the investors have a very detailed view of what's happening in this industry as opposed to on a generic basis. That kind of data is much more useful for all concerned, for companies to present where they are in the equation, and for investors to be able to understand the risk, and be able to, frankly, have a data set that enables them to make better investment decisions about the industry, which we feel should result in more capital allocation to regulated gaming because of its attributes, because there are so many companies that are doing the right thing with respect to this reporting. They just need to have a format and an ability to tell the world about it in a more uniform and powerful way, which we think will achieve results for them, and which will also result in, I think, continued evolution and improvement with respect to reporting for this industry, certainly relative to others, such as the alcohol industry, which is very good at sustainability reporting and reaps the benefits from that with respect to investors.
Now, we've spoken to a number of CFOs who bemoan these additional financial burdens and the effects, the fallout of, what is a reputational issue and no consistency of reporting as alcohol, as Robert has just said. Up to 4% above the norm. We've been, in terms of cost of capital, we've been told by certain companies. So, we think we can address these issues in part by having this consistent approach.
Yeah, so lower cost of capital, more liquidity. We think it contributes to better valuations. Just the overall picture as companies mature and take this more seriously, we believe that the benefits are definitely there for them. I think the other thing that's probably worth mentioning is companies are spending a significant amount around sustainability reporting. There's, and in this gaming industry, you can see some of the more mature companies have significant departments and people allocated toward this. We feel that there's an ability with that investment to have a more uniform approach for the whole industry, which will allow it to present itself perhaps with a more unified voice to investors and to the world generally. We also think that there's a really significant cost situation here that needs to be addressed. Whether companies know it or not, they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on sustainability reporting and compliance measures or reporting measures related to their compliance measures. We have a business model that we think is going to be very attractive to the industry because we use artificial intelligence. We're able to put forth a data set and a product that gives a very full usage and view to operating companies and investors for much, much less. And that, I think, is significant and significantly important for companies because of the amount that's being expended on these areas.
Also saves, the human resource involved in that and the other requirements continually having to update. This is done by automation.
Yeah, so it's real time. A lot of ratings and rankings agencies will rate you once a year, and whether it's fully or partially self-reporting or however it manifests itself, once you're rated, you don't get to have any ability to change that until another look is provided and another view is published in a year. We do it in real time.
And I suppose we're about to really kind of give people the first kind of idea of its capabilities by kind of outlining this, top 10 ranking from the industry. And obviously we don't want to give away too much because we're going to announce this over a number of weeks as part of a campaign. But I was keen to kind of get from both of you, what sort of key trends have you identified from compiling this list in terms of sustainability, in terms of which companies are embracing it? What's kind of the profile of the companies that rank highly?
Well, I think if we go back to the white paper, which we published in IGB a while ago, we received some really good feedback. And quite a lot of that we tried to input into the product. I think we need to point out, it's not our job or our intention to judge or have an opinion of any of the companies we rate. Robert likes to say we're Switzerland in all of this, which I think is fair enough. What we want is transparency and consistency, and for these peer-to-peer comparisons. So the model has the same criteria for everyone and has a methodology, which is available to review for everyone as well. So I think land-based. To give a couple of snapshots, land-based operators are generally better than iGaming companies at environmental reporting, which is slightly surprising, bearing in mind their huge build footprint, particularly in places like Vegas and Asia. One thing that always surprises me is the amount people want to talk about what they're good at. I understand that's a natural thing to do, but The lack of data in other areas is equally surprising, yet is often easy to fix. So I think there are two areas where, we need to continue looking at that. And whether you're an investor, employee, regulator, analyst, anyone in the gaming ecosystem. As Robert said, using a comparison of alcohol, which we've looked at in some detail as well, they are consistently reporting, and they also align behind a uniform agenda. Gambling is nowhere near that at present.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been asked by several companies to help them understand how they can improve their sustainability reporting, which we have a pretty unique insight in terms of how these companies are viewed, not only through the lens of FiNTEL Sustain, but also generally through the ratings and rankings that are seen in the market. And one thing that's clear, and Steve alluded to it, is especially in the regulated gaming relative to some other sectors, the focus on pet projects or specific initiatives, which while they may be of significant merit on their own, everyone seems to have their own pet projects and to some degree, and we don't see a uniformity of an approach. And I think what investors are really interested in is a uniformity of not just checking the boxes, but the ability to make sure that there is that there's reporting within all those areas, and that they're understood on a consistent basis, peer to peer. That kind of approach will definitely reap results for companies with respect to the attention that investors focus on them, because as mentioned earlier, one of the biggest issues is trust. When you go to the ratings and rankings related conferences in the industry generally or broadly, for covering all industries, every investor to some degree will raise the concern about the inability to trust the data. So what we're really focused on is trustworthy data that investors can count on from publicly available sources, that is able to be referenced and is able to be used for the purposes of evaluating risk within these companies from the investor's perspective, which is always going to be different. From our perspective, the more unified as a given industry, such as regulated gaming, can be in terms of its approach to investors, the better it will be for the industry. And I think we will see a greater number of investors be able to allocate capital because of a more mature and expansive and unified reporting regime on the part of the key operating companies.
Fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and it's been great to work with you on this entire project. Really appreciate your time and really excited to help you bring FiNTEL Sustain to the industry.
Thanks, Robbie. We're looking forward
Thanks,
to the
Rob.
top 10 being published, and looking forward even more to the feedback we're going to get from the industry.
Fantastic. So, everyone, thank you very much for Robin. This has been just really informative, and stay tuned on IGB for the rankings to be released. Thanks for watching.